Welcome to the deep dive. Whether you're a geopolitical strategist, a history buff, or honestly just someone trying to understand why the evening news feels so incredibly chaotic lately, this deep dive is going to completely rewire how you view global conflict.
It really will.
Hmm.
Because today we're looking at a text that, well, it doesn't just analyze war, it redefines the very concept of it.
Right. Our mission today is an ambitious one. We have a translated chapter of a highly provocative, groundbreaking piece of military theory. It's titled 10,000 Methods Combined as One, War Beyond Boundaries. And our goal is to deliver a complete, immersive strategic studies lecture based purely on this one chapter.
Yeah, we should clarify right up front, this text is not just a manual about weapons or troop movements. It's really a manual for surviving a world where absolutely everything from the global stock market to your local internet connection has been weaponized.
Exactly. And just a quick but super important note for you listening, the authors of this text make some extremely sharp, politically charged assertions.
Very sharp.
They talk about global superpowers, multinational organizations, and non-state actors in ways that are highly critical. So we are going to maintain strict neutrality here. We are not endorsing these viewpoints or taking any sides. We are simply putting on the author's analytical lenses to understand their strategic framework.
Right, we're just reporting on the blueprint they've laid out. We want to see the world exactly how they see it, even if it's uncomfortable.
Which brings us right into our opening theme. The authors start with this profound, chilling statement. The future battlefield may not look like a battlefield.
Yeah.
They use a quote by the futurist Alvin Toffler, and it's really the hook for the entire chapter.
So Toffler basically argued that modern war isn't just fought in, muddy trenches. It's not just airplanes and tanks anymore. A modern war fundamentally alters the price of gasoline flowing through pipelines. It alters the cost of food in your local supermarket. It wipes out the value of securities on the stock exchange.
It's terrifying to think about.
It is. The text emphasizes how war disrupts the entire ecological balance, and it pushes its way right into our living rooms via the television screen and information networks. The core idea you really have to grasp here is that in this new paradigm, you are already standing on the battlefield.
I mean, that completely shatters the old idea of the domestic front, right? Like traditionally, war was something that happened over there.
Right.
You sent the troops away.
Exactly. But if the battlefield is my grocery bill or my TV screen, then the war is already inside the house. So how do you even win a war like that? Because the authors talk a lot about the rules of victory, but they had a really unique take on it.
They do. They use this brilliant analogy about running a marathon.
Oh, I love this one.
Yeah, so they say that understanding the rules of victory doesn't mean you automatically win. It's exactly like knowing the biomechanics of long-distance running.
Right, like knowing how lactic acid works. Exactly. You can memorize the perfect stride length or how oxygen binds to blood cells. But that scientific knowledge alone isn't going to win you a marathon. Victor is the one who grasps the essence of those rules and applies them creatively.
Which means completely breaking outdated boundaries.
Right. And here's where the text makes a claim that is honestly pretty controversial. They claim that the most famous, highly decorated generals of the late 20th century, guys like Colin Powell, Norman Schwarzkopf, Gordon Sullivan.
The architects of Desert Storm.
Exactly. The text argues that these men are actually traditional soldiers, not modern ones.
Okay, wait, hold on. I have to push back on that, or at least play devil's advocate. The architects of modern American military dominance, the guys who used stealth bombers and satellite-guided munitions, they are considered traditional?
Yep.
How does that even make sense?
Oh, I know, it sounds crazy. But the authors argue there is this massive conceptual chasm between traditional warfare and true modern war. From their perspective, advanced technology doesn't make a strategy modern if you're still just using it to blow up other military targets. A stealth bomber is just a really fast, invisible cavalry horse. It's doing the same fundamental job. To win a modern war, a contender has to step totally outside the military sphere. The war will be won on a battlefield beyond the traditional battlefield.
Okay, so that brings us to the whole concept of boundaries. What do boundaries actually mean in this context? Because we use that word all the time.
Well, the authors break it down into literal and conceptual boundaries. So the line between what is a battlefield and what is a non-battlefield. The line between a weapon and a non-weapon. Soldier versus civilian.
Yeah.
State versus non-state. War versus peace.
The big ones.
Right. But their philosophy is that in a deeply interdependent world, these boundaries are totally relative. They only exist to differentiate objects, whether physical, technical, psychological, or ethical.
Okay, let's unpack this because this is where it gets heavy. What does beyond limits actually mean? Does it mean just total unrestricted anarchy?
No, and that's a crucial distinction. It absolutely does not mean the absence of limits. It doesn't mean using extreme apocalyptic means everywhere just because you can.
Like you don't just drop nukes to solve a trade dispute.
Exactly. That's not strategy, that's just destruction. Beyond limits means expanding the limited. It means expanding your available choices and using the absolute most suitable means to achieve your goal. But to do that, you have to break your own mental restrictions first.
You have to transcend your own ideology.
Yes, they actually trace this ideology all the way back to Machiavelli in the Renaissance.
Right, breaking away from the romantic ideals of chivalry.
Exactly. Machiavelli realized you have to achieve objectives by fair means or foul. And the text also points out that the ancient Chinese thinker Han Feizi preceded Machiavelli in this kind of pragmatic thought. So the goal is essentially creating a complete modern military Machiavelli.
And to do that, you have to combine things. They call it modified combined war beyond limits. And they use this incredibly vivid analogy about cocktails.
Cocktail analogy is great.
It really is. They say that combinations in war are like the cocktails in the glasses of the great masters. So ancient commanders like Alexander the Great or the kings of the Zhou dynasty, they didn't know what a literal cocktail was.
No, definitely not.
But they knew how to mix their ingredients, right? They knew how to combine infantry, cavalry, battle arrays, and stratagems. That was the old war cocktail.
Right. The old war was limited strictly to the military sphere. It was basically weapons plus armies plus tactics. That was the whole recipe.
Just a straight up whiskey on the rocks.
Exactly. But the new war requires a vastly different mix. A skilled hand today must pluck victory by combining all available resources. So the new recipe is military plus economy plus politics plus technology plus information.
All blended together. But if war is no longer just armies fighting armies, we have to rethink who is actually doing the fighting.
We do. And this leads us to the first big framework in the text. Supranational combination.
Right, because historically the nation state was the ultimate form of security. It was the ceiling.
Yeah, the text equates it to the ancient Chinese concept of all under heaven. The state was everything. But now, power is no longer exclusively national. The actors on the board have completely changed.
It's a crowded room now. You still have states, obviously, but then you have international organizations, multinational corporations,
Right.
and non-state actors, which is wild. That ranges from peace and environmental groups to the Olympic Committee all the way to terrorists and hacker networks.
It completely changes the meaning of a country. The text introduces this concept of the world village. In this village, a country is merely a large or small link in a much bigger web of human society.
And that web is incredibly dense. Modern countries are increasingly subjected to the influence of these massive regional and global entities. We're talking about the UN, the EU, ASEAN, OPEC.
APEC, the IMF, the World Bank, the WTO.
Yeah. And this means we are living in a transition era, the era of supranational politics.
Right. Traditional great power politics, which used to just mean state versus state tests of military strength, is yielding to networked global influence.
So how do the authors categorize the players on this new board?
Well, they categorize the U.S. as the all-round big power. Japan and Germany are seen as massive economic powers. China is the rising power, and Russia is viewed as fading. But the key to this era is how far-sighted powers operate. They borrow power.
Borrowing power. That is such a fascinating concept.
It is. A great example they give is the European Union. By using the euro, the EU unified its member states economically, which expanded their collective influence globally without needing a massive unified military. They borrowed economic power to achieve geopolitical security.
And this idea of borrowing power brings us to how the text analyzes the 1991 Gulf War. Now, again, we were just impartially outlining the text's view here.
Yes.
But they look at Saddam Hussein invading Kuwait, and they essentially call him a fool, not just morally, but strategically.
Right, because seeking ambition through outright physical territorial occupation was just desperately outdated. It was a 19th century tactic used in the late 20th century.
But on the flip side, they view the U.S. strategy in the Gulf War as an absolute masterclass in supranational combination. Because the U.S. didn't just act alone, right?
Exactly. Instead of just launching a unilateral attack, they maneuvered the UN to issue formal resolutions. That gave them the moral and legal high ground. Then, they used that to drag over 30 different countries into a joint military force.
And the combination kept going even after the physical fighting stopped.
Oh, yeah. They maintained 8 years of crippling post-war economic embargoes and constant weapons inspections. They borrowed the power of the UN and the global economy to keep Iraq contained long after the tanks stopped rolling.
Which introduces us to the author's new model of power. The formula isn't just counting your tanks anymore. The new formula is state power plus supranational power plus transnational power plus non-state power.
Right, you have to stack them all.
And to show how this works in practice, the text dives into the 1997 Asian financial crisis. Now, I want to remind the listener again, we are exploring the author's perspective here, and their perspective is highly critical of the U.S. They frame the U.S. actions during this crisis as a deliberate, aggressive, double combination tactic.
Yeah, they really analyze this as an act of economic warfare. The task claims the U.S. used an arsenal of influence. First, they say the U.S. manipulated APEC to check any Asian-only economic cooperation. They basically blocked the local countries from helping each other out.
Forcing them to turn to the IMF.
Exactly. And when the IMF stepped in, specifically with a massive $57 billion loan to South Korea, the text points out that this money came with incredibly strict strings attached.
The authors use some intense language here. They liken those IMF loan conditions to armed robbery and disguised economic occupation.
They do. And it gets deeper. They argue this was a combined use of different forces. You had financial speculators like George Soros aggressively shorting the currencies. Then you had credit rating agencies, Moody's, Standard & Poor's, Morgan Stanley downgrading the region's debt, which caused massive capital flight.
And then the Federal Reserve steps in to orchestrate a bailout for an American hedge fund, long-term capital management, to protect the U.S. economy while Asia burns.
Right. The authors look at all of that working together, speculators, rating agencies, the IMF, the Federal Reserve, and they say, this is a superweapon. Even if it wasn't coordinated in a secret war room, the combined effect was devastating.
Wow. Okay, so if the actors have changed, and the weapons are now IMF loans and credit ratings, what about the battlefield itself? That brings us to supra-domain combination.
Right. Going beyond the domain. First, we need to define what a domain is. In this text, a domain is simply the scope of human activities.
Like the military domain, the economic domain, the cultural domain.
Exactly. Political, diplomatic, technological information. Those are all domains.
And the authors use this great analogy about aircraft.
The sound barrier analogy. I love this. They say that just as aircraft had to forcefully break the sound barrier to achieve supersonic flight, modern strategists have to break out of the confines of single domains. If you only think in terms of the military domain, your strategy is trapped flying subsonic. You have to achieve freedom of military thought by crossing into other domains.
Now, the U.S. Army did have a doctrine in the 90s called full-dimensional operations. That sounds kind of similar, right?
It was a spark of genius, yes. But the text notes that it regrettably died out because it lacked a completely groundbreaking foundation. It still viewed the non-military domains merely as support for the physical military, rather than as primary battlefields themselves.
Which means we are seeing a massive expansion of warfare. We are moving away from historical destruction, like Kutuzov burning Moscow to starve out Napoleon, or the bombing of Dresden, or even the Cold War's mutually assured destruction.
Right. The era of bloody massacres is fading. We were moving into an era of low casualty, but extremely high-intensity warfare. It's an overlapping fusion of information warfare, financial warfare, and trade warfare.
Why bomb a city when you can just bankrupt it?
Exactly. And the text shows how military actions can actually trigger massive economic fallout, sometimes entirely by accident.
Yeah, they give two really striking historical examples of this. The first one was October 19th, 1987, Black Monday.
Right. So U.S. ships attack an Iranian oil platform in the Gulf. It's a purely physical military action. But the news hits Wall Street, triggers an absolute panic about energy supplies, and the stock market crashes.
It erased $560 billion.
Yep. And the text points out that $560 billion was the economic equivalent of destroying the entire nation of France at the time. A single military skirmish accidentally caused a catastrophic economic blow.
And the second example is from 1995 and 1996, with China's missile tests in the Taiwan Strait. The physical missiles just hit the water. They didn't destroy any cities. But the psychological impact acted like an avalanche. It caused massive capital flight and crashed the Taiwan stock market.
So the authors asked this chilling question. If those massive economic impacts were just accidental byproducts, what happens when a military intentionally targets those domains?
What happens when you intentionally select a battlefield that isn't physical?
Right. You intentionally choose to fight in the currency markets or the technology sector or the cultural narrative or computer networks.
They use the UN Butler inspections in Iraq to prove this point.
Yeah, Richard Butler's Weapons Inspection Committee.
Hmm.
The text claims that those inspections and the sanctions tied to them achieved far greater disarmament and non-military damage to Iraq over several years than the sheer physical bombing of Desert Storm ever did.
Because it dismantled their infrastructure from the inside out. Okay, so if the battlefield can be a currency market, what is a weapon? This is where we get into supra-means combination. Everything is a means.
Everything. A means is just a method to accomplish an objective. And the text asks some incredibly provocative questions to challenge our assumptions.
Right, like, can you use state-sponsored assassination against financial speculators who are attacking your currency?
Or can you launch precision airstrikes against drug sources in another country without actually declaring war on that country?
Can you just buy up massive amounts of stock to take over and control another country's media networks?
The line between a business transaction, a crime, and an act of war completely blurs. The expanding arsenal now includes military force, sure, but also economic sanctions, diplomacy, mass media, technology, and finance.
The text cites the British theorist B.H. Littlehart here. He defines strategy strictly as the art of using military means to achieve political objectives. But this new math is totally different.
So completely. The new math uses mathematical models, philosophical arguments, and even artistic methods as direct military tools.
And to explain how all these means relate to our objectives, they use my absolute favorite analogy in the book, the Chinese box.
Yes, the box is one inside the other. It perfectly illustrates the relativity of means.
So imagine you open the biggest box. That's your grand objective, right? Let's say it's securing your country. But to achieve that, you use a means. Let's say that means is a strong military.
Right, so you open the country box, and inside is the military box. But building a strong military is now the objective of the generals. And their means to achieve that is buying fighter jets.
So an objective at one level is just a mere means at the next level up. A military force is a means to secure a country. But in supranational actions, the country itself becomes a means to a larger global objective.
And once you understand that relativity, you realize you don't always need the biggest, most explosive tool. That's the core argument of combination advantage. A single, incredibly powerful tool is no longer superior to multiple, coordinated, lesser tools working in perfect symphony.
They used the 1978 Iran hostage crisis to prove this point.
Yeah. Let's walk through that history. The U.S. initially tried to solve the crisis with a rash, purely military attempt, Operation Eagle Claw.
Sending in the helicopters.
Right. And it failed catastrophically in the desert. The single powerful tool didn't work. The U.S. only succeeded when they evolved their tactics and combined their means.
They froze Iranian foreign assets in international banks.
That's financial warfare.
They imposed a strict arms embargo.
Trade warfare.
They secretly supported Iraq in the Iran-Iraq War.
Proxy warfare.
And they maintained continuous diplomatic negotiations.
Exactly. They combined all of it to create this overwhelming pressure matrix. But here's the twist. According to the text, nation-states aren't actually the best at combining these means right now.
Right. The real innovators are non-state actors, the underworld.
It's fascinating. The authors argue that non-state organizations are currently vastly superior at combining means because they operate without any moral restraints or bureaucratic red tape.
The examples they give are terrifying. They talk about the Russian mafia in the 90s. They weren't just street thugs. They combined physical assassination and kidnapping with highly sophisticated banking network hacks.
And look at terrorists. They combine physical bombs and hostage-taking with network raids and brilliant psychological manipulation of the global media to achieve their political goals.
And then they bring George Soros back into it. They describe how a single financial speculator can combine speculation in the currency and futures markets with deliberate public opinion manipulation to create a massive financial panic.
They even outline a theoretical scenario regarding China in 1998 to show the scale of this power.
Oh, right. The renminbi hypothetical.
Yes. They argue that if China had acted selfishly during the Asian financial crisis and aggressively devalued the renminbi, it would have undercut all the struggling Asian exporters. It would have devastated the Asian economy and inflicted heavy, heavy losses directly on the United States.
It just proves that a central bank policy shift can be vastly more destructive than a military strike.
It really does. So we've got the actors, the domains, and the weapons. Now, Here's where it gets really interesting. How do we organize this conflict?
Right, we have to go super tier. We have to break the levels of war.
To explain this, the authors use a great metaphor. Historically, war progressed tier by tier, like cooling molten steel.
I love that image. It solidifies from the bottom up.
Exactly. It accumulated from local tactical fights up to regional campaigns and eventually up to total grand war. But the new method is to evade this rule entirely. War is no longer cooling steel. War is a dragon.
A dragon with interchangeable limbs, torsos, and heads that you can snap together however you want.
Yes. But first, we have to understand the traditional levels we are breaking. The authors note that the thinker, Herman Kahn, divided nuclear war into these excessively fine, complicated stages. The text simplifies warfare back into 4 traditional levels.
Let's break those down. Level 1 at the very top is grand war, or
Yeah.
policy. This is the supranational to national scale. It's the realm of politicians and presidents.
Right. Level 2, moving down, is war or strategy. This is the national level, how the military and non-military actions are used to achieve the policy.
Level 3 is the campaign, or operational art. This is lower than a whole war, but higher than a single battle, moving massive armies around a theater.
And level 4 at the bottom is the battle. Tactics, the most basic granular combat actions, the soldier in the trench.
So traditionally, everyone stays in their lane. But super tier combination means making the roles interchangeable. A small tactical action can be used to create a massive strategic effect, and a grand strategic method can be used to achieve a small tactical goal.
To illustrate this, the expert impartially relays the text's example of Osama bin Laden.
Right, and again, just looking at the author's analytical framework here.
Yes, the text notes that bin Laden used a purely tactical level method, specifically 2 truckloads of explosives at the U.S. embassies, a level 4 weapon.
The most basic weapon.
Right. But he used it to directly threaten U.S. national interests on the highest strategic level 1 scale. He bypassed the campaign and operational levels completely. And conversely, to deal with this tactical threat, the United States had to mobilize its massive level 2 strategic resources just to carry out a level 4 tactical retaliation.
The hierarchy is completely inverted. The pawn attacks the king, and the king fights the pawn.
And this highlights the ultimate asymmetry of the information age. Previously, a man-machine combination like a pilot and a plane only worked on a localized tactical battlefield. One pilot couldn't destroy a whole nation.
But today, the authors detail how one individual with a computer and a modem can bypass the tactical and operational levels entirely. One hacker can cause damage equivalent to a national war on a strategic policy level. It is truly terrifying leverage.
So, bringing it all together, we have the final strategic framework. To achieve victory in the future, the authors say one must completely adopt the 4 beyonds.
Let's list them out for the listener. Number 1, beyond nations. You must use supranational combination.
Number 2, beyond domains. Superdomain combination. Fight in the economic and information spheres.
Number 3, beyond means. Super means combination. Use absolutely everything as a weapon.
And number 4, beyond levels. Super tier combination. Invert the tactical and the strategic.
If you do all of that, you have achieved war beyond boundaries. The text leaves us with this final, profound premise. The authors state that the greatest transformation of war is not a new weapon, it is a new way of thinking.
A completely new way of thinking.
Which is exactly what we promised at the start of this deep dive. So tomorrow morning, when you are drinking your coffee and scrolling through the headlines, I want you to ask yourself a question. Are you looking at a random economic shift, a cultural spat, and a technological glitch? Or are you looking at a deeply combined beyond limits war hiding in plain sight?
Once you put the author's lenses on, you can't unsee it. The battlefield is everywhere.
It really is. That's all the time we have for this deep dive. Keep questioning the boundaries, and we'll see you next time.